Hey there, Gen Mexers. Brighton here, and I am super excited to talk about choosing where to live in Mexico. Mexico is the top destination for folks from the United States moving to another country, but it's a really big country, and there's so many options, and the question is, how do you choose? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I've got some special guests with me, so thank you so much for being here. If you're here live, thank you so much for watching. If you are coming by later. But I just want to pull up, one of our guests is Mariana from the Mexico Relocation Guide. And I just want to pull up really quick her website. Her website is such a great resource. So best places to live in Mexico. Let's just sort through, just kind of scroll through some of these because there are so many of them. And we will be answering your questions and talking about these today. San Miguel de Allende, I'm actually heading there in about 3 weeks. So if you have already chosen that to be your home, send me an email. I'd love to get in touch with you while I'm there. Lake Chapala and Ajijic. Ajijic, I think, is the world's oldest expat destination for folks from the United States. Puerto Vallarta, I was there this summer, and it is a wonderful place. Merida, I'm sure Mariana will be able to tell me how to pronounce that one. But yeah, that's a great place over in the Yucatan Peninsula, also in the Yucatan, the Riviera Maya, Ensenada, if you want to be close to the United States, or same thing, Rosarito. And then, of course, there are all these, as she puts them, less popular cities, Mazatlan, Huatuco, Oaxaca. I would put La Paz in there. So many places. And so today, I've brought on some guests who have a lot more experience with being in Mexico than I do. Our story is, we came down from San Diego at the time, and we flew into La Paz kind of on a whim. We didn't know anything about La Paz. It was just, it had been written up in a blog, and we were looking for a place to go for a long weekend trip for my wife's birthday. We flew down to La Paz and we bought a house the second day. So that's where we are. I really didn't know anything about these places like Huatuco and San Miguel and Querétaro. So at Mexico City, there are so many great places that we could have chosen to live had we thought about it. So hopefully you are here today because you are thinking about it. Now, if you wanted to do kind of like an exploratory trip, it would probably take you years to make it through and really get to know each of these places. So what we're going to do today is hopefully help you narrow down the list of places that you want to check out so that you can go hit a few, see which ones are the right ones, or see which one is the right one for you, and then move to that location. Or maybe, you try something out for a year and you move on. Anyway, I'm babbling. Let's bring on our guests. Okay, well, Mariana, maybe we can do ladies first. Well, we've got Mariana in the upper right-hand corner, and then Ernie is down below. Ernie, Sir Dragon X. But Mariana, why don't you go first and let everyone know kind of who you are and your story of getting to where you are.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Brighton, for inviting me. This is an honor for me to be on your show. If you guys have no idea who I am, my name is Mariana. I run Mexico Relocation Guide. And basically, I was raised in Mexico. I was raised part-time in Mexico and part-time in the United States. So that's how I know about both cultures. That's why I'm fluent in Spanish. Actually, when I lived in Brownsville, Texas, most of my life until I graduated when I was 18. But when I was growing up in Brownsville, Texas, my mom actually prohibited us from speaking English in the house. She only wanted us to speak Spanish. And I really do thank her now, because back then I didn't understand. I thought it was really just mean of her, right? Whenever she would cut us off and be like, no, en español. So, but I do thank her now, because I'm very thankful to be fluent in both Spanish and English. I was raised in Mexico City until I was a very small child. And then we moved to Guadalajara, where I spent probably up until almost my preteens. Then we moved to Brownsville, Texas. But every summer, my parents would basically ship us back to Mexico City for 3 or 4 months. And that's how I know Mexico City and the US so well. Then somewhere around 2020, 2019, my husband and I, Dustin and I, started looking into what was going to be our long-term plan, just how we were going to be able to eventually retire. And the more we started looking into it, the more it just made sense that Mexico really needed to be a country that we needed to consider in the future, just because of the high cost of living in Austin, Texas, which is where we now split our time. But long story short, we started looking into it. And the more I started looking into it, the more I realized that some information was really great and some information was really out of date. And that's how Mexico Relocation Guide was born.
Great. Thank you so much, Mariana. And I have to ask you, Merida or Merida? How do I?
Yeah, the Merida is correct.
Merida.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you for being here. And let's pop on Ernie now. Ernie Sir Dragon Axe from retired life in Mexico No Bull. And let's kind of get his story of how he ended up where he is. And I think we're also wishing, as we were chatting, tomorrow is Ernie's birthday, and part of his ending up in Mexico had to do with another birthday trip. I ended up there because of my wife's birthday. Ernie, take it away.
How's it going, Brighton? As Brighton said, I'm Ernie Baca from Retired Life in Mexico, No Bull. I basically moved to Mexico. I retired back in 2017. I worked for the federal government in a federal law enforcement position. And we retired in 2017, and we started looking into, we just wanted to travel. That was one of the big things that my wife and I had dreamed of, is let's travel. So what I did was we planned a couple of trips, and around my birthday, my wife told me, hey, there's this really great place in Mexico that they celebrate the Day of the Dead, and everybody gets kind of dressed up, and they do a big procession. We went up there. We went ahead and planned a trip because my birthday, actually, I was released from the hospital on the Day of the Dead. My mom was with me in hand. So the Day of the Dead kind of has a very symbolic meaning to me. So we went to San Miguel de Allende. And on these trips, we were kind of looking at, let's buy a second home, a retirement home, or actually a third home because I have one in Santa Fe. But let's buy, travel back and forth and just enjoy our retirement. And we started, actually, our first trip was to Colombia. And, I was dabbling in things and saying, how much would a place here cost? But we never got serious about it. And we fell in love with San Miguel. It's a lot like Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I'm originally from. As a matter of fact, they call San Miguel the Santa Fe of Mexico, because it's very artsy and of its history. And so we went, and I said, hey, why don't we see how much houses are down here? And we ran into a booth that were selling houses, and they said, hey, we'll give you a tour. It was a gated subdivision that they were building. And so we said, yeah, why not? We don't have any obligation to buy. Well, long story short, we ended up buying a house. Not with the intention of living there, but with the intention of staying there. We went back home, and we started to discuss it and started saying, you know what? Why do we really need to live here? Why don't we just move to Mexico? We had a house down there. So we decided to move. And it took us about a year to get there because in the meantime, I got head and neck cancer. And I ended up, and actually, I was treated in Mexico, in Monterrey, Mexico. I have family, and my wife has family. My wife's originally from Monterrey. And so I was so impressed with the medical treatment there. We would always visit Monterrey a lot because my in-laws live there. And throughout the years, I've visited Mexico. Also in my capacity in my job when I was in Washington. Well, I've also worked on the border, but I did a lot of work with Mexico and all throughout Latin America. And eventually I even did 3 years in Brazil. So I was very familiar with South America, Latin America, the culture. Um, and so I felt comfortable coming down here um, to Mexico. And so we walked away with a house, and then we ended up buying a house, and now we live in Mexico. Now I'm building another house in Monterrey.
Wonderful. So great. So you've been around Mexico a little bit. So me, like I mentioned in my story, we just kind of happened upon La Paz and bought a house, and then realized later it's like, well, maybe we should have looked at some of these other places. I mean, we're really happy we did. It was right before the pandemic. We made the leap, and we're glad. And it's interesting. I've met so many people who've done the same thing, who were like, "Oh yeah, I came down for a weekend, and now I live here permanently, or now I live here part time." So everyone takes their own path, but hopefully we're going to answer some questions here so we can find folks the right path. I do want to bring in the folks that are watching right now, and let's see here. So we've got, actually, I'm going to switch this over. So, and actually, Ernie, if you could move your camera a little bit, so you're not so far on the bottom. Otherwise,
Let me move it up a little bit here.
There we go. So Alan says hi. He's a regular on this channel. So someone looking in the Central Highlands, Brenda, and not really into the beach. And actually, I'm going to go through when I asked the question, I'm going to talk about what people thought was important. So we've got someone, Martha from Vancouver. Brenda actually mentions that she's from Wisconsin. I am also from Wisconsin. Tony from Texas. And someone mentioning, don't forget to push the like button. We'll make sure that happens. And so we have the Metal Maiden just thanking us for being here. So as we go along, I want you guys to keep putting your questions down there. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about moving to Mexico, and then we'll celebrate a little bit of our happy hour, because these are always happy hours. So let's start here. Oh, we've got some other folks popping in real quick. Mike from Seattle. We've got George from BC, and maybe looking at Lake Chapala. And also Paul. So makes the summers in La Paz seem cool. I'm not sure what's hotter than La Paz in the summer. I'd love to hear.
From Arizona, he is.
Oh, just from Arizona. Yeah. Mark from Arkansas. Also some more folks from Vancouver, BC. So we've got a nice audience here. Illinois, David. So thank you all for being here, and start typing in those questions. Whatever questions you have, we're going to try to go through as many as possible. But I see Paul from Arizona popping in too. But let's start out kind of, maybe I can ask you guys if, I'm going to throw up a graphic first, if that's okay. These are some of the things when I did a survey of my channel. This is what people said. The location was the most important thing. The cost of living, housing, then climate, whether or not there were expats there, availability of healthcare. A lot of people typed in comments, so we might get to some of those comments. But I guess those things people are thinking are important. Let's start with Mariana, and maybe you can tell us kind of like some key things that people should be thinking about generally when they're choosing a location to move to.
Yeah, I think that's an actually very interesting graphic. I have some notes here on the side. So if you see me look to the side, it's because I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Sounds good.
But, we recently published an article on Mexico Relocation Guide about this very topic, because it's probably like the number one question that I get, aside from healthcare. This is probably the number one question I get regarding, living in Mexico. Residency is probably the number one, but living in Mexico, this is like second. And a lot of people just are like, hey, I really like the beach. I don't want to be where it's really hot in the summer, even though I want to be near the beach. And I want all these things, right? Where would you recommend I live? And, Mexico is a very large country. So it's really hard to narrow it down to just like 3 top places. But I think I put it always back on them, and I just say, hey, you really have to ask yourself, right? Do you want to live near the beach or do you want to be in the Central Highlands? And if you want to live in the Central Highlands, are you very sensitive to elevations, right? Because the elevation in San Miguel de Allende, for example, is very different than the elevation in Oaxaca or in San Cristobal de las Casas or in other Mexico City. They all have different elevations. So if you're very sensitive to that, look into that. Do you want to live in a small city or do you want to live in a bigger town? Do you want to live in a more rural area? What about the climate, right? I think personally that should be maybe on your top 3 things to look into is the climate. If you're very sensitive to heat, then you should know that if you live in La Paz or, and a lot of people want to live on the beach, which obviously, yes, it's a dreamy location. But if you're very sensitive to heat, if you're very sensitive to hot weather and you've never lived in this type of weather before, you might not like it when it comes to the summer. And Brighton, you probably have a better, something better to add to this because you live in La Paz part-time. But a lot of people, and I'm sure you come across this, don't realize how hot it was actually going to get in the summer.
Yeah, we really didn't know. I mean, we were just down there in February. It was gorgeous in February. We're like, yep, we'll buy it. And the good news is we're always planning on coming back to Portland for the summers, but a lot of people love the heat. So yeah, that is a good question. Like, are you good? I mean, that's maybe something I could throw in. Are you going to be full-time or are you going to be part-time? La Paz is wonderful in the winter, but there are other parts of the country that are wonderful all year round that, maybe we should have looked at. And another thing, healthcare, that is something that I was surprised that people kind of rated it so low is, most people that are watching my channel are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it's getting to the point where healthcare is going to be an important thing. And some places have good healthcare and some places are more limited. Yeah. But Ernie, maybe we can get your thoughts on your top things you think people should consider.
Well, I think Mariana is really on point here. One of the things I want to expound on when she talked about altitude. We talk about San Miguel de Allende, for example. It's San Diego weather all year round, but then you have the altitude that you have to deal with. So, in San Miguel, it never gets too hot, never gets too cold. I don't even have an air conditioner in my house. Or a heater, to be honest with you. And the way our house is built and ventilates, it gets cool in the summertime. It gets cool at night, and then it warms up during the day into the 80s. Maybe if it's really hot into the 90s, but it's a dry weather. So those are things that you really need to look into. And I think that one thing that Mariana was talking about, she mentioned the beach. We all love the beach, and we all have this idea that we're going to sit on the beach with our margaritas and have a nice sunbathe. But sometimes when we go to Quintana Roo a lot, we have a timeshare in Puerto Morelos, and we go there almost every year. And we go during different times of the year, but there's only so much you can do at the beach. And so, those are things that you need to look at. And I think the other thing that's kind of high on my priority list is healthcare. Not only because I experienced cancer and I was treated here, but also what I'm seeing, like you said, Brighton, there's a lot of people that are in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, their 70s, people that want to come here because they're coming here because of Social Security and they can't afford to live in the United States. And one of the parts of Social Security is Medicare. I get a lot of questions about Medicare, which isn't a system that works here in Mexico. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider. For example, even qualifying for medical insurance or the version of Medicare that they have here. I'm getting ready to release another Relocating to Mexico episode with Mariana where we discuss healthcare and the differences between the private and public healthcare systems. Some people can get away with the public healthcare system. They don't have issues. Other people do. And then your quality of hospitals, for example, in San Miguel de Allende, I'm close to Mexico City. So I know that if something major happens, I'm there in Mexico City. Uh, when I'm in Monterrey, that's where I was treated for cancer. It's the second largest. Well, many will argue that it's the third largest, but actually Monterrey and Guadalajara changed places for second. Um, Actually, Monterrey is a little bit bigger in landmass, and population-wise, they kind of one year Guadalajara is the second largest city, and one year Monterrey is the second largest city. So you can imagine if I'm in the second largest city right now, Monterrey is the second largest. Um, if I'm in the second largest city, I know I'm going to get good health, private health care. So those are a couple of things that you need to look at, and I see a lot of people that want to get away from the cold. Uh,
Mhm.
and so that's really great to get away from the cold. But if you've lived in Wisconsin or Seattle all your life, I lived in South Texas all my life, most of my life. I'm originally from New Mexico. I actually grew up close to where Brownsville, Mariana's in Brownsville. I grew up in McAllen. We have a lot of things in common, Mariana and I do. And and the thing is that it's hot and humid down here in McAllen. I mean, I'm used to that. That's what I grew up with. Now I'm also used to New Mexico where it's nice and cold and it snows in the wintertime a lot of time. So those are things that you really need to look at because not everybody can adjust to that. Even being used to McAllen, Texas, when I've gone in the summer to the Rivera Maya area, I can honestly say that it can get unbearable if you don't have air condition. And I
Mhm.
remember, I don't turn on my air conditioner in San Miguel because I don't have one. And then all of a sudden I get to Monterrey or I get to the Riviera Maya and we're running inside to get to the air conditioning. So those are a lot of things. And then even in San Miguel, you have to look at it. It's a dry climate, humidity versus dry.
Mhm.
Those are all things that you need to look into because I'll tell you what, when and the altitude sickness, I get it myself when I have to go back and forth.
Mm.
When I come back to the States, um, you know, it takes about a week for me to adjust. My wife also. So those are things that you have to, and especially if you have a heart condition too, that the
Mhm.
altitude can actually affect that. There's some people that are told by doctors, don't go to a high altitude place.
Wow.
So I think there's a lot of research to be done on. And Brian, I think you and I did the same thing. We kind of just, this is cool. We bought a place and let's live in Mexico. And for me, it worked out. And but it not necessarily going to work out for other people. And I think Mariana and I have discussed this before that one of the things we were talked about buying versus renting and that you
Mhm.
might want to go and see these different places. And I do know that Mariana does uh, relocation tours where you can go and you can meet, you can see real estate. Those are kind of the things that you want to look into. And even if you can't afford that relocation tour or whatever, um, when you move to Mexico, I know plenty of people that, as a matter of fact, I know somebody from Wisconsin that they dreamed of Puerto Vallarta. They rented for 6 months, didn't like it there. They came from a small town in Wisconsin. They
Mhm.
they were overwhelmed with the amount of people that were in Puerto Vallarta. They ended up in San Miguel de Allende, and they're
Mhm.
renting there. They're falling in love with it, and so that's one of the things that you need to
Mhm.
really look into. I think Mariana hit the nail pretty well.
Well, I think it's interesting that just even the mention of altitude. We obviously live at sea level, but it never even occurred to me to think about altitude. And the other thing, this is something Mariana mentioned earlier when she sent an email, was kind of transportation or a little bit of accessibility. Like, are you going to be able to walk down the street?
Yeah.
Like, there are areas with cobblestone streets, and there's no Americans with Disabilities Act.
And
And
San Miguel is one of them. Plenty
yeah.
of hills and plenty of cobblestone streets, and even Ajijic. If you go to Ajijic, everybody. There's a big retirement community and of older people there, but you got to remember that Ajijic is full of cobblestone streets too.
Yep.
So it may be good for a good amount of older Americans, but it may not be good for you if you're in a wheelchair or if you use a cane. Those types of things you really want to look into because it can get pretty hard, even for a person that doesn't have any disabilities to walk on those
Yeah.
streets.
Yeah. So I know we've got a number of people. I want to have them come in with their questions. They're kind of stacking up here, but I do want to make sure everyone knows this is a happy hour. And so I do want to say cheers and early happy birthday.
Happy
To
birthday, Ernie.
We won't sing. But yeah, I am having myself a frozen margarita. My wife bought me a margarita, Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville Key West margarita maker, which makes the slushy kind of margaritas kind of fun and exciting. But let's go around. And also, I want those of you who are at home participating in happy hour to let us know. Doesn't need to be alcoholic, but let us know in the comments. Mariana, what are you drinking?
Vino blanco.
Ah, Vino Blanco. Very nice.
That is white wine.
Yes. And Ernie.
And I have here Smirnoff Ice. It's the Day of the Dead. It's a special edition. And actually, you can find, they make a vodka. Smirnoff is making a special edition vodka. And it's actually tamarindo, spicy tamarindo flavor.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I found their drink. So I thought I had to do this for this particular stream.
I love Smirnoff.
And it's good.
They always have the best flavors of all the infusions and stuff. I love Smirnoff for that.
And this one's spicy tamarindo. And I actually knew about it because I bought a bottle of the vodka. They actually have the vodka, but this is actually their cooler drink or whatever you want to call it, wine cooler drink. Very
nice. Yeah. And everyone out there, let us know what you are drinking for our happy hour today. And let's look through here. So I want to get through, pop into the comments here. Let's see here. How about we've got someone from Los Angeles and Georgia, but Lynn is asking a question, comparative housing costs in expat coastal communities. And one of the things I didn't really explain, it's probably most important to explain what Mariana does here, is the Mexico Relocation Guide provides a service with consultants, I guess, in towns across Mexico that can help you relocate to Mexico. So not only does her website have all this information, but there are people in these different places. Mariana can maybe share more at the end. But I think this is more of a question for Mariana. Comparative cost.
Yeah. I honestly think that there's already resources like this available online, like Numbeo. I use it very often. As a matter of fact, in my blog post, I think if you want to compare two different cities, like if you wanted to compare Mazatlan to Puerto Vallarta, I would go to numbeo.com and numbeo.com, plug in the two cities. It'll tell you, and it's a crowdsource. So what's really great is people actually go in there and put in their cost of living. So you can see, how do those two compare? You can even compare the cost of living of a certain town or city in Mexico to where you're currently living. That way you can see, what your purchasing power would be or what you would need to make more or less in your existing city to live a comfortable life in that other city, or what the difference is, right? Because most likely it'll be lower. And it tells you everything from like renting a 3-bedroom apartment close to the city center to renting far away from the city center, transportation, cost for a meal for 2 people, cerveza, right? Beer, milk, bread. It gives you a lot of comparisons. I personally don't have a page where, we compare like cost of living in any 2 cities because it changes so often. I do, however, have a lot of blog posts where I share specific people that I've interviewed, their cost of living. And then I also share how you can live in a specific town under $2,000 a month.
And I think a lot has to do with too, you have to be very careful because when we talk about coastal cities, especially coastal cities, there's the tourist area where a condo could cost you $2,000 a month on the beach.
Yeah.
And, if I'm just going to use the Rivera Maya area because you have so many little communities in that area. You have Playa del Carmen, you have Cancun, you have Tulum, you have all those little towns, and one town can be exponentially more. Puerto Morelos, which was a little fishing town now that has grown. At one time, Puerto Morelos was very, very, very affordable, but now the prices are going up. So those are the things that you have to look into, especially with the coastal towns. Puerto Vallarta used to be very, very affordable, but everybody's heading to Puerto Vallarta. So
Mhm.
that's one of the things that is to do your research. And I think one of the other things is renting versus buying also, because sometimes we have this misconception that, yes, Mexico's cheaper, more affordable to live in, but we have this idea that I'm going to live there on $500 a month
Yeah.
because that's what someone told me. And trust me, you can end up living on $10,000 a month here in Mexico, depending on where you live. So I
Mhm.
think a lot of it has to do with just planning, looking at where you want to go. What is your budget? Um, we we purchased our houses. Why? Because in Texas, I was paying $9,000 a year on property taxes on a
Mm.
$300,000 a year house. And Mariana, who lives in Austin, could probably tell you she even pays more in property taxes than that. Even if your house was paid off, she still has to come up with a good chunk of change. My property taxes in San Miguel are $300 a year, not a
Mhm.
month, a year. My property taxes in Monterrey are going to end up about the same. Um, both those houses are in more expensive areas of Mexico, but it's all relative. Can you live in San Miguel on less than $2,000 a month? Yes. Can it become expensive? Yes, very. It's same thing in Monterrey. So that's another big factor when deciding, especially with the coastal areas. You're going to find that prices can vary actually 5 kilometers down the road from each other.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's
And
very
big
important to do.
differences too. Like there's so many, like you 5 kilometers down the road might not have electricity or water. So,
Exactly.
but yeah. And actually, you mentioned the financial thing. I got to put a plug in for 1 week from today, a little earlier in the day. So not necessarily happy hour unless you're on maybe the East Coast. I'm going to have a financial planner who was born in Mexico, grew up in the United States, now lives in Spain. That's why it's a little earlier. But he's going to talk about financial planning for people who want to retire into Mexico. So that's going to be great. Watch for that a week from today.
A much needed subject. That's good.
Yes.
You're bringing
No,
some
and
in.
I noticed that, Brighton, on your announcements, and that's an awesome topic,
Mhm.
and I think that's something that needs to be touched on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's great. And it wasn't something I even thought of. He contacted me because one of his clients said, "Hey, there's this guy on YouTube that I follow. So maybe he'll be on your channels too soon."
yeah, well, I might want to steal him for a show
Yeah,
too.
definitely. Yes, definitely. Okay, let's look through here. So Andrew, Andy, and Dorothy from Calgary are about to move to La Paz permanently. So congratulations. So cheers to Andy and Dorothy. I look forward to meeting you in December. I'll be starting up my happy hours there in December when we make it back. Let me see here. Um, we have someone else looking at La Paz. Need the fresh ocean air, simple home, near decent healthcare. Yeah, La Paz, being that it's the state capital, has good healthcare. Someone else mentioned this about the fresh air. There is some pollution in La Paz, and air pollution. And also someone else mentioned, oh, here we go. David was asking about polluted areas or where water security is a major concern. So these are two things that I'd say La Paz kind of pops up a little
Hmm.
higher on the radar here. But either one of you have any ideas on this topic of air and water issues?
Well, I can tell you in
Yeah.
Monterrey,
I
I
think
can
Ernie
tell
can
you
give
in
you a
Monterrey,
big
they don't
one
have
in
any
Monterrey.
water. They're having a water shortage right now, and actually, they're cutting off the water in Monterrey, and they also have a pollution problem too.
Yeah.
Um, so
Ooh.
Monterrey, there is, and actually in San Miguel, we were having a water issue, but this year San Miguel has gotten a lot of rain. Um, what happened with San Miguel, well, it's in a dry area. So what happened in San Miguel was several years back, there was a lot of floods and they had to empty out well, with the idea that it was going to come back the following year, they emptied out the lake. And for a couple of years, no rain came. So
Mhm.
the lake started getting so low that, as a matter of fact, inside the lake, there's some buildings, like old historic buildings where the
Wow.
town used to be. And you were starting to see the top of the buildings and everything. The lake was getting so low. But now we've gotten rain down in San Miguel, a good amount. So they're okay. But that's a major concern in Mexico too, is water. Um, I have gotten a little bit more educated about the water situation in Mexico because of Monterrey. Um, I've been lucky now that we're building our house. I'm staying at my in-laws' house, and they live in a older part of. Well, it's actually uh, on the carreteras, what going out south basically, and it's an older neighborhood where they can't cut off the water. It's kind of hard to. They don't have the newer infrastructure, so we haven't had to suffer that much. But the rest of Monterrey, several neighborhoods have been out. I mean, they were doing without water for weeks.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that we're doing is in our new home is we're building a cistern system where with a water tank where it fills up with water. So if we have those issues where they only turn on the water once a week, fills up
Mhm.
the tank, and then we have water. So those are things that there is. Now I do know in the Rivera Maya area, and I know in La Paz, I think they're pretty abundant in water, from what I understand. In the Baja area, in the Rivera Maya area, there's not that much of a water issue. Pollution, you're going to see a lot in Mexico City, Monterrey, Guadalajara. Um,
Big
those are the
city.
big cities.
I think there was a water issue in La Paz, wasn't there, Brighton?
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely been water. I mean, it's yeah, the aquifer is going down, and we have that the water is not on every day, so everyone has a cistern for their house. So we have lots of questions and whatnot. So I want to go through kind of pretty quickly for some of these, and let's see here. So Luke said, "Hola from Guadalajara." Pammy is asking; she's thinking about moving to Puerto Morelos, but wondering if it would be better further inland. Thoughts on that, guys?
I would ask her why she's thinking of moving inland. If she's thinking about moving or living in Puerto Morelos, I mean, I feel like there's more to this question.
Mhm.
Valladolid is obviously a much larger city than Puerto Morelos, right? So you're going to have more amenities, transportation, probably more access to medical centers, better infrastructure. But why would you switch from Puerto Morelos to Valladolid? Because weather-wise, I think they're both probably very similar, considering they're both, in the on the peninsula. I would just wonder why.
Yep. Okay. Well, feel free to add to your question.
Yeah, let
I
us
do
know,
want to
Pammy.
do want to pop here. So, Sacred Fire Music is saying
Oh,
love
hello.
the relocation guide in
Thanks for the
Mariana.
love.
Um, and let's see here. So someone is considering a move. So Tammy considering a move to La Paz from Toronto.
You're gonna have a ton of neighbors by the end of this live stream.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of folks, lots of Canadians, I think, that end up in La Paz.
That's
So,
awesome.
including here we go. Let's see what Dave said. Dave, I know he's in Nova Scotia. Um, yes, you may melt if you're used to Nova Scotia. And my casita is available for very, very short term stays. So, um, let's see here. So this is a good question from Mark. Is it safe to live outside of a town in the country like in the US? So let's talk about that, because there are some people who live out
In rural
away and
areas.
yeah.
Yeah. I always get asked this question, right? In general, like, is it safe for me to live in Mexico? I'm sure you guys can add
Mhm.
your own commentary on this, but my biggest thing is you should always use the same common sense that you would back home. If you normally would lock your windows and lock your doors, you should do the same in Mexico, right? If you would normally not keep your belongings to where you can't see them. Do the same in Mexico. I will say that the rural areas of Mexico tend to be a lot safer than the very, very large cities, usually because, with a higher population, probably the more likely that you will have criminals. It's just, it's common sense anywhere in the world. So I would say if you're looking to live somewhere like, on the outskirts of Puebla or in the rural areas of the Estado de Mexico or something like that. I personally know that those areas are safer than like Mexico City or Puebla City.
And another thing is, like, for example, in San Miguel, some of these cities are growing so quickly that
Mm.
you end up, like, for example, in San Miguel, I actually live out in the outskirts of San Miguel. I don't live close to the centro. I can't walk to the centro. I have to use my car to get there. But I lived in a gated subdivision, brand new. A lot of these subdivisions are popping up all over the place that are close to town, but not necessarily. They're out in the country. Um, the one thing that I do suggest, because I live out of town in San Miguel, so there's a lot of little towns a little bit further out, and we have friends that are out there, and there's certain things, like, for example, these little towns, they share one big water tank. What we were talking about, and the infrastructure. Um, are you still close enough to get into town, into San Miguel, to get to the hospital? Those are the things that you need to look into also. Um, as far as safety, um, I always get this. I always do these videos. Is Mexico dangerous? And then I get like 50 million comments without anybody even looking at the video, because everybody wants to argue that you get this. One side of the cartels are there, and it's very dangerous, and we never want to go to Mexico to. No, I could be in a school shooting any day in the United States. I'm safer in Mexico. What we need to do is quit those arguments, because in truth, I've been in the law enforcement field for 30 years. Part of that included security, because one of the agencies that I worked for did protection. So, you know, I always say security is an illusion, and security is what you create. It's the illusion that you create for yourself. There's
Mhm.
no such thing as 100% secure. You're never going to go anywhere that you're going to be 100% secure. Even in the safest places in the United States, or the safest places in Mexico, something can happen. You can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. A lot of people make comments about, well, as long as you're not in cartels, don't worry about it. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? Uh, yes, don't worry about it. You're probably 99% safer. But what happened in Tulum? Uh, there was local cartels were shooting it out with each other in a tourist area. So you could just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But at the same time, like Mariana says, you do this common sense thing. Um, do you lock your doors in the United States? Do you have an alarm system at your house? Um, do you do these things? If I go to New York, I even worked in some, and there's a big argument of, well, I've lived there for 15 years and nothing's happened to me. Well, I've been to Chicago. I've been to the slums of Chicago. I worked undercover in the slums of Chicago. Has anything happened to me? No. Does that mean it's safe? No.
Right.
So, but when I worked in the slums of Chicago, or when I went to New York, I had a whole team that was backing me up, that I knew that I was going to be safe. We took precautions. We did certain things. So that's what made it safe. What makes it safe is your habits, what you do. Or traveling through Mexico, not a problem if you travel on during the day. You
Mhm.
travel on toll roads. Um, you just practice common sense, and then you don't stop at a gas station out in the middle of nowhere. You stop at the gas station where everybody else is stopping. Those are common sense things that you can do, and you'll be fine.
Yeah,
And
I agree. I think that, totally. And there's the community aspect is another big thing with creating safety. It is,
Absolutely.
um, yeah,
People
there's a
watch
lot of,
out for each other.
yeah. So I do want to recognize John drinking Pacifico, and we've got a scuba diver drinking a martini. But I wanted to pop in here. What we're covering, looks like we're covering up Ernie a little bit. Um, renting a 1-bedroom in these different places, Querétaro, Oaxaca, GTO. What's GTO?
Guanajuato.
Guanajuato.
GTO is
Okay,
Guanajuato.
Guanajuato. Anyway, thoughts on comparison of prices in those cities? I mean, it's probably it seems like it's all over the place in every city. If you want to live in the middle of everything, or if you want to live on the outskirts.
Yeah, I think you know what I think. Well, I live in San Miguel. That's a little bit more artsy. Some people can say it can get expensive, but at the same time, you can affordably live there. It's not one of the most expensive places. Um, and Querétaro is becoming very, very, very popular.
Very.
Querétaro is actually becoming very popular amongst young people.
And just a quick aside here, I will be there in about 2 or 3 weeks. So if you do
There
live
you
in
go.
Querétaro now, I'd love to connect. Querétaro, San Miguel de Allende, and Mexico City. I'll be making lots of videos coming up about those places, interviewing people as I go.
And in Querétaro is building a very big expat community. It's more metropolitan than San Miguel de Allende. San Miguel de Allende is more artsy, more artists that live there and have galleries and that type of thing. Querétaro is a little bit more of a metropolitan area, but like I said, it's only 40 minutes from. I actually live in the Salida de Querétaro, which is the highway that goes to Querétaro. So I'm in Querétaro in 30 minutes, 45 minutes. They have a Costco, a Walmart. That's where we go to get all of our stuff. They don't have a Costco. They might get a Walmart in San Miguel pretty soon. They have a city market in San Miguel. But as far as Oaxaca, San Cristobal, Guanajuato, here's the thing with Guanajuato is a beautiful place, a historic place, but right now Guanajuato is going through a lot of issues right now with the cartels that are fighting for territory and that type of thing. Guanajuato, if you want to live there, it's a beautiful place, but I would say to really be very, very judicious about where you want to move. Because I'll give you a perfect example. Actually, San Miguel is in the state of Guanajuato. There's a Guanajuato, which is the city, which is the capital, and then there's the state. And this all over the state, they're having issues. If you go 5 to 10 minutes from outside of San Miguel towards Celaya and those areas, you don't want to go there at night. Trust me. And they're having a lot of issues with random violence and that type of thing where you could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I think Guanajuato is a little bit, I would look more like at San Miguel because, more security is placed there because it's more of a tourist area. I would look at Querétaro because you can live in of course there's bad areas of town everywhere, but for the most part, it's a big city and it's very decently. I have never felt uncomfortable there in Guanajuato. Oaxaca, if you want to be a little bit more adventurous, that's more ingrained in the Mexican culture. And one of the other things that's very important here is I think you discussed this at the beginning, is expat communities on your survey, other expats. How many people are going to be speaking English? Querétaro happens to be a trade center. So you have a lot of the local people that speak English, not necessarily because of the expats there, but because they conduct international business. So they have to speak English. So those are a couple of the considerations.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the English speaking because same thing, Monterey. I noticed Monterey has like 50 of what's the fast food restaurant up in Canada? Canadians, help me out here.
Tom Hortons.
Tim Hortons.
Tim Hortons,
yeah.
not Tom Hortons. Tim Hortons. Yep. I actually did a video in front of it, and everybody thought I was in Canada.
Yeah, it's crazy up there. So there's different areas. Everything's a little different. I want to kind of move us through some questions here. Brian's asking how long to spend exploring Baja. I would say a minimum of 3 weeks if you just want to do a really cursory thing. But if you really want to dig in deep, you'll have to find, you could probably in 3 weeks kind of get an idea of where you'd want to spend more time. But yeah, that's what I would say there. Most active state. So
Oh,
most active
interesting.
state in the U.S. is Colorado. Is there a healthiest state in Mexico?
I would say Querétaro is very active. I
Mhm.
mean, I feel like personally, every time that I spend any amount of time there, I really see a lot of people exercising, running, just generally being active. I also feel like Mexico City's pretty with a grain of salt, right? Because I mean, Mexico City's like a ginormous city, and probably the majority of people are not very active. Um, but a lot of people are, because I see again, gyms are always crowded. People are always exercising out, especially on any given Saturday when they close Reforma down, and then people are, bike riding or rollerblading. Which, if you go to Mexico City, Brighton, you should definitely come on the weekend because.
I think I'm gonna miss like the whatever the day is that it's like that goes down the
Oh,
streets.
when
I'm
they
like, oh
close the
no.
street, yeah, it's a sight to see.
I need
Um,
another trip.
this is a great question. I'm going to
Okay,
look into it because yeah, it would be fascinating to know which one is the most active or healthiest
cool.
state in Mexico. I
All right.
really do think that Querétaro is very, very active, but I could be wrong. I haven't been to every state in Mexico, by the way.
Yeah. So, other opportunities in BCS to get involved in ocean conservation? Definitely lots of groups, lots of volunteer opportunities. And I think that's something also in terms of where you go, finding a place that does have volunteer opportunities. There's lots of them in Mexico,
Yeah.
places to get involved in. Um, and
I'd like to come back to Brenda's question if we can
yeah.
on like what is the cheapest place to rent a one bedroom, whether it's Querétaro,
Oh, yeah.
Oaxaca, Guanajuato, or San Cris, because I think a lot of people might be interested in that.
Mhm.
Aside from Brenda, and just personally, to piggyback on what Ernie was talking about, it all depends on what your lifestyle is. But if you're really looking just at economics, like black and white, where's the cheapest place I can find a one bedroom at? I would have to go with San Cristobal de las Casas. And San Cristobal de las Casas has some amazing rentals that go for very, very, very inexpensive. I mean, you can find a really nice place for $400 a month, a one bedroom,
and it's a
really nice
very
place for 400 US dollars a month, 8,000 pesos in the city center, walking distance to everything. The difference is at San Cristobal de las Casas, one, it tends to be a lot colder than nicer areas like San Miguel de Allende or Querétaro or Oaxaca or even Guanajuato. And then also the expat community is not as prevalent. So you will definitely need to know how to speak Spanish.
But I will say it's a very beautiful place.
It's beautiful. And I mean,
It's
it's so close to Guatemala that you get all the Guatemalan culture.
Mm.
And it's just like gorgeous art, gorgeous architecture. Everything is small. I don't know why, but it's just very pretty.
So I think this is a follow-up maybe from earlier. I think old soul Pammy might have asked about the different locations and being nervous about hurricanes.
Oh, yeah.
Kat and I, we live in a house with 91 panes of glass and a palm tree roof on the water. We were able to get insurance. So that's kind of our thought there. You know what, if it blows away, we'll rebuild. Someone else, a couple people have asked about why I chose La Paz, and it's something that I addressed in the beginning of the video, but really quickly, we didn't. We just went down for a quick weekend vacation and bought a house, so there was no process involved.
You didn't consider other areas.
No, we did not. So, oh, actually, this is something about dogs, aggressive dogs. And let's see here. So, staying in El Comitan and La Paz. So yeah, I know there is something like I noticed Puerto Vallarta, there's lots of street cats, and in La Paz, there's lots of street dogs. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on, real quick thoughts on areas that are dog friendly.
In La Paz?
In kind of just give us a general, I think in La Paz, it's kind of hard to answer that, but just generally
Yeah.
across the country, thoughts?
I mean, I think Mexico is becoming more and more dog friendly, but we're still ages away from being what the US or even Canada is in regards to dog friendliness. So I do think that if you are, and I think he was asking about like some dogs being aggressive. I mean, that's the owners. And unfortunately, sometimes the culture in Mexico is get a dog to protect your house, not to treat it like part of the family like we do in the US, right? So the dog just kind of gets a little bit neglected, and it's unfortunate to see and it's sad to see. And sometimes those dogs can become aggressive because sometimes they're hungry, they're starved for attention, or they're really trained to protect their area. So they will go after any other dog that walks through that area. I know there's problems with this in other pueblos like Ajijic, for example, which is very, very popular with a lot of retirees and more younger people, where a lot of owners will let their dogs just kind of roam around the town. They belong to a home, but they'll let them roam around. I'm sure this happens in San Miguel too. And then they attack somebody's dog that's on a leash that wasn't doing or provoking a fight or anything like that. And there's really not much you can do it. I mean, you can go to your local police and try to do a denuncia, but I mean, yeah, probably nothing really will come out of it other than you talking to that dog owner, and maybe sometimes that's not comfortable, is confronting somebody that has an aggressive dog. Long story short, I still do think that the culture in Mexico is not quite where the United States or Canada is in returns to pets. I do think it's changing, but I think that's something that's important for you to consider if you're going to be moving into an area. And another reason why I think it's important for you to rent before you buy, because if your neighbor has an aggressive dog and they're constantly fighting at each other's fences, that's going to be uncomfortable for you. And if you bought that place, it's going to be really hard for you to make that problem go away.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate on what Mariana was saying is the Mexican culture, when it comes to dogs, is a little bit different than what we see in the United States. I live in a gated community in San Miguel, so there's rules. But even with the rules, people let their dogs go and say, you know what, he's fine.
Yeah.
And I think Mexico's moving towards becoming more dog friendly. People are starting to treat their pets more like part of the family. But what you'll find in most Mexican culture is that dog is, as a matter of fact, we have two little mini huskies. I'll just give you an example of my family. We have two little mini huskies, and they're beautiful little dogs. And everybody, when they come over to my in-laws' house or whatever, at the beginning, they were just like, get away, get away, get away. It's a dog. It's a dog. And we were like, no, there are babies. And then like, no, it's a dog. It's not a baby. It's a dog. So that's part of the culture. And so you just, I think Mexico is moving towards a better, and like Mariana said, I think it's a matter of seeing if you live in a, oh, and by the way, my family has fallen in love with the two mini huskies. So now they're part of the family, and now they don't even call them dogs. They call them the girls and that type of thing. But it takes time, I think, in Mexico's getting there, but it's still going to take a long time. And one thing that I do want to mention, in most places, someone mentioned volunteer work. There's a lot of dog shelters. A lot of expats get involved in saving dogs and get involved in dog rescue and shelters and that type of thing. So that's another thing that if you really love dogs and you really want to get involved, especially these street dogs that are in Mexico, that's one thing that if you want to find stuff to do with your time, there's plenty of it here.
Yeah. I'm going to pull up one last comment here just because I think it's good. And then I'm going to have you guys just do a quick, like 1 minute wrap up. We're coming at the top of the hour. Morelia is where Russell lives. And for $400 a month, he's got a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 3,500 square foot home.
I applaud you, sir. That's awesome.
It is possible to make this happen in Mexico. Sorry that we did not get to all of the questions here, but I'm going to let Mariana address this one in her wrap up as a woman. But I know there are a lot of single women moving to Mexico.
Yes.
So if you could answer this and also tell people how they can get in touch with you at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Mariana, I think Puebla is a wonderful city. In fact, I did a video that was titled, "Is this the best place to live in Mexico?" Because it truly does have it all. for a fraction of the cost of some of the very, very popular places like Mexico City, San Miguel de Allende. It's very different than San Miguel de Allende, than Mexico City, than any of the Central Highland areas. So I will start with that, because I don't want to mislead anybody and say like, oh, you're going to have that, you know, artistic old world charm that you will in every single corner that you see in San Miguel de Allende. It's not like that. It is there. The centro area of Puebla is very artistic. It is very old world charm. There is a lot of culture, a lot of history, but there are also very modern and, you know, up and coming areas. I think one of them is called Angelopolis, and that's like a city within a city. I mean, it's a gated community, has everything you could possibly need there. You don't need a car. You could walk to everything, very modern townhomes. I do think it's much more affordable than somewhere like Mexico City. That's a sizable city too, or maybe even somewhere like Querétaro, which is becoming very, very popular. But I recommend that you go watch that video, because we do recommend some neighborhoods to look into Puebla. And then the other nice thing about Puebla is you have Cholula really nearby, which is a gorgeous city full of artisanal local art, very beautiful pottery, very beautiful textiles. It's great. And then you also have Atlisco, which is one of the Pueblo Mágicos in Mexico, which has, by the way, the largest fields of cempasúchil, which is the orange flower that we put on an altar for Day of the Dead. So with all that said, I think Puebla is a great place because you're also centrally located to a lot of things. Now, one thing you do have to consider with Puebla is there are earthquakes. So that is something that if you have to measure your risk with that, right? Puebla is very earthquake prone.
Okay. Whoops. Let me put this, turn this off. And yeah, I just want to mention here. Oh, let me put it back on there. So right in front of Ernie's face,
Thank you.
Mexico Relocation Guide. Search for that on YouTube. Mariana's channel, wonderful, has lots of detail about all these individual places. So Ernie and I actually started this video conversation after I did my my interpretation of Ernie's channel. And we said, you know what, we need to get Mariana in here. She is definitely has all the information. Also MexicoRelocationGuide.com. And now, Ernie, let's pop you on this screen and let people know how they can find you.
Well, I have a Facebook group called Retired Life in Mexico No Bull. Also, I have a YouTube channel, and basically that's where you can find. I have Twitter and Instagram, but I'm not very active on those two. I post every once in a while there, but it's mostly my Facebook group, and I also have a live chat group on Discord. And basically, if you look up Retired Life in Mexico No Bull on YouTube, you can find me. I don't make any money off of this. I'm not monetized. I'm monetized in the sense of ads, but you don't really get much of anything. But I have started this project as a nonprofit project. And I remain to keep it nonprofit because that's why I want to keep that no bull. I try to give people information, up-to-date information about all types of issues, from living here to traveling here to what's going on with immigration. I actually do a show with Mariana. What I was just mentioning, we're going to do, I just need to edit it and upload it to YouTube, but it's a show called Relocating to Mexico No Bull. And I'm a big supporter of Mariana's service. And I tell everybody, one of the things you need to do is do your research. And this Mexico Relocation Guide has pretty much everything you need to do your research. All you need to do after you do your research is to verify it. But I think you'll find that pretty much everything in there is verifiable. So
awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. And thanks to all of you who are here. I wish I could pull up every single comment. Someone asked how I crossed the highway in Centenario. Yeah, you just gotta wait. It's one of those things in Centenario. We are a one speed hump town, and it's like I wish there wasn't a highway through the middle of it, but it's really not that bad. So yeah, there's so much more to know that I want to make sure there'll be links to these guys' channels down below. And also, as I mentioned, there will be, I'll be doing the same thing with a financial planner next week, a little bit earlier in the day. And so those videos will be kind of across the bottom of the screen here of something good for you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So yeah, we'll do it again sometime.
We
Okay.
need to.
Salud,
Hasta
everyone.
luego.
Happy birthday, Ernie.
Thanks.
Salud.